Guys, so we're going to talk about the last keyer here, which is the IBK color and IBK gizmo. So these two nodes, it uses the image-based keying method, which is very different than the algorithm approach that these two use, using some math to try to get rid of the green screen. This is using a different form. And we kind of create this clean plate version, and then we kind of use this node to do the difference between the original and this clean plate. So I'm going to go down here and do it from scratch. I've kind of denoised the plate because sometimes we'll get a little bit softer of a result, especially with the IBK, which kind of picks up a lot of more noise because it's a much softer key. Like we said, that it's pretty good for edge keys. So if you create an IBK color node and you plug it in, basically they plug into each other, but this IBK color will give you, if we switch it to green, click the green, you'll start to see, because we're working on a green screen, and I picked this footage intentionally because there's some defocus stuff in the background. So we see that there's some harder things to key. It's not a perfect sharp edge. It's very soft, and that's going to make it more difficult. And that's where this keyer really shines. So if we go back to the IBK color, set it to green, there's a pretty simple approach in the way to use this. So your goal of this is to get basically just green with all of the objects removed. And that's pretty much it, like a pure clean screen or clean plate rather of this result. So essentially what we can do is there's a size slider that kind of expands the pixels from the edge of everything from the color you selected. So if we do that, it's not going to work too well just right off the bat because you see it's grabbing too much of the color from the objects around. So for example, if we increase the size a lot of that and we use the IBK gizmo, and so the way this works is you plug in your footage and you plug in your clean plate into the C pipe here. And if I select the IBK gizmo and set it to green, this is the node that actually creates the alpha. So this is the node that creates the clean screen or the clean plate, and this is the node that creates the alpha from the clean plate. So we can see that this is what that's doing, the alpha. And even though this is like a really crappy job, I just did like a really fast one, it's already actually doing something halfway decent. So that's interesting. And that's really not even changing the settings. That's not how I recommend doing this, but it is giving something. But it's not the best that we can get. And what the goal is not to create a clean plate that looks like this. So what you want to do is set the size as low as you can. Usually I set it to 1. It has to be 1 for this to work, for this method. And we go right to the edge of where those objects are. And so the first thing I'll adjust is the lights. So this kind of adjusts where that edge is in terms of the light and darks of the image. So if that doesn't make sense, it's easier to understand visually. So if you just look at it and we click at the color wheel and lights, basically you just want to play around with these sliders until this edge goes to the very edge of where you're seeing color. So if I say, okay, well, maybe there's a little bit more red and we want to push it into the reds a little bit, we can play with the red slider, and you see that that kind of pushes it around in the way that we might need. We can also play around with the green and the blue, and it's kind of doing a similar effect. So all you really want to do is eyeball this to get it towards the edge of this kind of green here. And we're trying to capture the really soft detail. So it's okay if it goes into, you'll see. So if we push it a little bit further, you'll see it starts to kind of go a little bit crazy. And that's kind of the point where it's going to break, because you don't want to, anything that is black is going to get captured in the alpha. Anything that's green is kind of what we're removing. So we don't want to push it too far where we get all these speckles, because our alpha is going to be all messed up. We just want to get it right to the edge just before those little speckles start to happen. It starts to break. And you can adjust the darks as well. You don't really have to as much. Usually you can just do it in the lights here, and it works pretty well. But again, it's kind of just eyeball. you can see if I push it around, maybe we can capture a little detail by using the darks, and maybe the darker regions will get a little bit more in there. But it's kind of pushing it a little bit too far, so you got to be a little bit careful. And you see that we haven't captured all of our detail here. So there's a trick for that, but I'll show you that in just a second. So what you need to do after that is, after you've adjusted the size back, usually just down to 1, and then do your light and dark, is you want to do a patch black. And what this does is it expands that green into the color or where the color is in the image. So we're creating that clean plate by expanding the green. So it's taking the edge green and just pushing it in. And we're kind of tricking Nuke into thinking we've taken these objects offset, and meaning out of the frame of the video. And we're just, that's the pure green screen behind. It's kind of what you're doing, but you're faking it. So you can expand that, and you can expand it quite a lot. So I'm just going to expand it all the way until we have something like that. And if you push it too much, it's kind of averaging everything inside there, so you don't want to do that. You just want to push it as far as it needs to go and switch over to the IBK gizmo. And so that's the alpha that we're actually creating, and it's pretty good. So if you look at it, it's a little bit noisy. We're using Nuke's default denoise, which is not particularly amazing. There is a better denoiser. It's not free, unfortunately. It's called Reduce Noise, or Neat Video. So you can Google Neat Video, and it does a much better job than the denoiser. But the IBK picks up a lot of noise, so sometimes you need to go into the denoise and increase your denoise amount to try to reduce it. Of course, you can lose a little bit of detail, so you need to be careful. For now, we're just going to leave it. It's not too big of a deal. And so, okay, so this is a result, and it's kind of doing an okay job actually here. And what you could do actually, so now after in the IBK gizmo, you could go here and you can adjust the red and blue weight. It basically just shifts the key around in those colors. So if you play around with it, you can see different results. And so maybe I would push it a little bit towards the red weight, because I see that it's actually capturing a little bit of that hair detail back into the key. So I'm just kind of sliding that around, and you can see how it's affecting it. You don't want to push it too far, but that's kind of what's happening. So in those colors, it's just shifting the key around, having more or less. And same with the blue and green weight. You can kind of adjust that and fill in some of those holes a little bit. So you see that this is kind of semi-transparent if we leave it at default, but maybe we can shift it up a little bit and solidify it. Then again, it's kind of, this lamp might actually be made of glass, so maybe it's supposed to be a little bit see-through. So, you might want to keep it low and then fill this in later with another keyer, which is probably what we would do. So that's just something to keep in mind. One keyer might work in different areas. So if I just push this all the way up, now our glass is going to be solid, and that's not going to work there, but it is working there. So that's a key mix example that we'll go over later. And then the other thing you can do is you can hit luminance match, which I guess it just kind of uses the brightness a little bit to adjust the key. And that's pretty much what it's doing. So you can see it just kind of changes the result of your key, and usually it's better. So usually I'll just turn that on. But you just need to play around with really the setting and see, hey, is this giving a better result or not in this instance? That's usually a lot of what keying is trial and error. And then we also have auto levels, which is doing some kind of basically crazy adjustment. You can see it says it removes hard edges from the mat, but sometimes it doesn't really work as intended. So you can kind of click these colors, and it's just doing some kind of math behind in order to kind of push the colors around and kind of try to preserve some of the image. So you see it gives a different result. If we turn it on, it actually seems to be working. Working better in this area. So if we turn it on and off, you can see just a slightly different result. So that's just something you kind of play around with to see if you're going to get a better result. And then one other thing that this node can do is, if I plug it into a background, it's actually a decent despiller. So if we plug it in and we say use background luminance, what this is actually doing is putting some color into the edge of our key. So let me just disable it, and we'll just merge this over the background just to see what it looks like without that on. So that's what this looks like. Obviously, we have some serious issues with transparency, seeing through the wall here. But if we enable the use background luminance, sometimes some of the edges of the key will actually do it'll do a really good job on despill. So obviously here it's totally breaking, but if you look on this lamp, we can see when we're using the background luminance, it's kind of getting rid of that dark edge a little bit. So what it's doing is taking the background color and kind of pushing it into the foreground so that we don't get any weird despill problems around those edges. So it's doing kind of a weird dynamic despill where it's just doing a color correction. It's just merging it a little bit more on these edges here. And so that's an interesting kind of result. That's how to use the node, but we'll learn how to use it in conjunction with other ones, because you can see that it works great in some areas. It's not doing the best on despilling. We have some harsh edges in the key here as well that could be adjusted. You can adjust, I'll adjust the red weight and see, that's how you can check your key as well, merging it over a background. So I would probably do something, really push it like this. And I'm not even worrying about the despill. I would just be looking at only the alpha to try to get a good edge over here, for example. So I would just try to get a good alpha of this, and then I would combine this with other keyers. And so here, again, this is what we're going to be doing in the next lessons. But if you were just trying to get a one key result for whatever reason, I don't know, but maybe you're in a rush or something like that, you could always just go here and try to get something like that. And yeah, so that's kind of one thing to think about. So one other technique you can actually do with these IBK gizmos to sometimes get a better result is called an IBK stack. So you take these IBK colors and you do this kind of weird trick. Instead of just patching the black all the way up, you keep the number really low, like 1, for example, and then you just duplicate this IBK color and just double it and do the exponent of 2. So you could just put 2, 4. So I create another one and make it 4. Create another one, set it to 8. So I'm just doubling it every time. And, then you could do a lot bigger number. But what it does is it just expands the green. It's kind of a trick that compositors do. And again, a lot of techniques with compositors is just combining a lot of tricks to get the result you intend. So you're kind of just doing this duplicate trick, but the way it expands the green is a little bit differently. And for whatever reason, sometimes you can get better keys by duplicating this IBK color over and over and doubling that patch black number. So if I just do that a bunch of times until it's pretty much out of frame, we can take a look at that key. And you see that we're starting to maybe get a softer key. I don't know if it's working as well in this instance. Some of the edges are kind of strange here. So maybe I would just go with a single IBK color and erode it. That's one other thing you can do. You can erode it a little bit if you need to. So you see the color, maybe it's not completely covering all the colors, so we could expand it just a little bit. And then I'll just patch black all the way up until it just fills, something like that. And then let's compare the two. So we have this one and we have this one. So very different keys. You can see this one seems to be working better, actually, just a really quick one versus the IBK stack. So the IBK stack is not always better, but it is doing a nicer job over in this area. So you see in this area, maybe we could use the IBK stack version versus this one that has a lot of fog, kind of weird stuff around it. So that's just something to consider. Another way to create these quote-unquote clean plates is another trick that if you just take a constant and you select the color, So these are just different ways to use this IBK gizmo. Instead of using the default IBK color and trying to create this clean screen this way, is you could just take a constant and then just select that color and plug that into the color. And sometimes that will give you a different type of key. So if we select between the two, you see that the keys actually look different. This one seems to be doing maybe a better job around the rope. And that's just a very quick and easy constant plugged into the IBK gizmo. Whereas this one, maybe it's better overall. And we can sample different areas. So for example, if I look at this background, I could take that constant and I could select maybe near the frame. So I'm going to get a green that's more in this area. So if we look at the IBK gizmo and we compare slightly different keys, just using the same tool. So really that's kind of how I will approach keying a lot of the times. You have a lot of tools in your tool belt, and usually you try to throw the ones at the problem that work most of the time first. So if there's a keyer that you prefer to use and usually gets your problem solved, I'll go for that first. And if you're not getting a good key, I'll kind of work down the list of methods of keying to try to see which one will work the best. So that's kind of, keying is problem solving in one sense. So that's pretty much how the IBK color works, and IBK gizmo. So you could merge this again right over the background, but we're getting those kind of holes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't want to ramble on too long. We can actually start to get into the compositing structure and how we can build these keys up and get the perfect key. Or if you're working in TV, I'll show you like a quicker way, maybe that we don't need to spend as much time on a key, but still get something usable. So it depends on your level of quality required and the amount of time that you have generally. So a feature film key might be a little bit more complicated versus, a television key where they expect the key done in one day, for example.